Today's materials are two insightful guides on evolving SAP compliance architectures and the shifting role of FI/CO consultants in an era of continuous real-time global tax mandates. Let's dive straight into how to elevate this strong foundation.
The economic argument against embedding tax logic in the SAP core requires concrete comparative scenarios to effectively persuade hesitant stakeholders.
Right, let's unpack that because as I understand it from the notes, the argument here is that building country-specific rules directly into the ERP just creates this compounding maintenance burden over time.
Yeah, it builds up aggressively.
So I look at it this way. Building country-specific compliance into the SAP core is a bit like buying a house where the plumbing is welded directly into the concrete foundation.
Oh, that's a great analogy.
Right, because if a single pipe leaks, you can't just open a cabinet and fix it. You have to bring in jackhammers and tear up the floorboards.
Exactly, and the complication is that it isn't just one leaking pipe. The International Plumbing Code is changing like every 3 months.
Yeah, but if you're trying to sell this idea to a skeptical client, doesn't the argument need more hard evidence than just saying it will cost millions in maintenance?
It absolutely does, and that's the primary weakness of this section. The text claims that an ERP-centric architecture will cost, millions in maintenance and years in implementation lead time over a decade, but this assertion remains entirely too abstract.
It's just a vague number.
Right, it tells the reader there is a compounding cost, but it doesn't actually show them what that cost looks like in operational practice. I mean, a CIO who just spent $50 million in 3 years implementing S/4HANA isn't going to be moved by some vague, decade-long budget warning.
Because they get pitched decade-long budget warnings every single day.
Exactly.
But I have to challenge that a bit. SAP is historically positioned as the ultimate single source of truth for an enterprise, right?
Well, yeah, that's the whole marketing pitch.
It's designed to handle complex global finance. So if I'm a CIO, my default instinct is to keep everything inside the fortress. Doesn't the sheer scale of the system justify the millions in maintenance?
That instinct is exactly what the author is up against, and it's driven by sunk cost fallacy and the illusion of safety. Yes, SAP is a fortress, but tax mandates are inherently volatile.
Right?
Hard-coding external regulatory volatility into a stable core is essentially institutional self-sabotage. So my suggestion to fix this gap in the argument is that the author needs to ground the economic assertion in a direct side-by-side comparative scenario.
Okay.
They have to illustrate the crushing operational friction of an ERP-centric model right next to the agility of a decoupled model.
So how do we make that visceral? Like, how do we break through that boardroom numbness and show them the actual operational pain?
If they want to prove this effectively, they could use concrete examples like showing a mandatory update to Italy's Fattura PA schema or Poland's recent highly disruptive KSEF technical revisions.
Oh, yeah. KSEF was a nightmare for a lot of teams.
Total nightmare. The author should walk the reader through exactly what happens in the embedded model. So when Poland changes a required XML node, you have to initiate a formal SAP change request.
Right.
You then have to pull specialized ABAP developers off of your strategic business projects just to modify the custom code.
Which is already expensive.
Extremely. And then that custom code triggers rigorous regression testing that freezes all other financial system updates. Finally, you have to transport the changes to production, which means sitting through a high-stress weekend deployment window where any single failure could halt invoicing entirely.
That paints a vastly different picture. It's not just an abstract line item on a budget anymore. It's a severe opportunity cost.
Exactly. You are weaponizing your own IT infrastructure against your business agility.
And I assume the decoupled scenario is supposed to look entirely different?
Completely different, and that's the contrast the author must provide. Contrast that weekend nightmare directly with the decoupled model. The exact same Polish regulatory update requires just a simple configuration change in the external compliance platform's orchestration layer.
Wait, so no code changes?
Zero SAP side changes. It requires no regression testing of the core ERP, and it avoids transport windows entirely.
Oh, wow. So you're documenting the recent past rather than predicting some theoretical future. By showing the KCF example, you prove that these systems change frequently and aggressively.
Right, because when you document historical friction, The argument shifts from a theoretical warning to an undeniable operational reality. You force the reader to realize that if they hard code into SAP, they're going to bleed critical resources with every single regional update.
So we've established that ripping tax logic out of the SAP core saves massive operational headaches and millions in maintenance.
Right.
But decoupling that architecture does something else entirely. It forces the enterprise to perfectly standardize its data payload before it ever leaves the SAP environment.
It has to, yeah.
And that accidental forced standardization brings us to the author's next point about structuring SAP data. Let's look closely at the section discussing how SAP data must be structured for AI consumption.
Okay, yeah.
I have to admit, I question the placement of this point. Discussing AI requirements in the middle of a continuous transaction controls guide feels a bit like packing a tuxedo for a camping trip.
A tuxedo for a camping trip? I love that.
It's highly valuable on its own, but does it fit the immediate environment? Is it distracting from the primary focus on tax authority validations?
The sudden introduction of AI data requirements disrupts the central narrative focus of the real-time compliance guide.
It just threw me off completely.
Yeah, it throws the reader off balance. The weakness in this specific section is that the topic of structuring SAP data for AI consumption feels completely bolted onto the piece.
Right, like an afterthought.
Exactly. It pivots away from government validation platforms, submission channels, and mandate deadlines, and it introduces a completely new, futuristic objective without clearly tethering it back to the primary topic of tax compliance.
But I look at the enterprise landscape right now, and AI is the only thing boardrooms are talking about.
True, very true.
If we just tell the author to delete this section, we strip away a very forward-looking, highly relevant piece of strategic advice.
Oh, we don't delete it. My suggestion is to integrate the AI points seamlessly by framing AI readiness not as a separate isolated objective, but as a direct, inevitable byproduct of building a rigorous, modern compliance architecture.
Wait, I'm not sure I fully connect the dots there. How does building a tax compliance pipeline automatically make my company ready for artificial intelligence?
Well, think about the biggest hurdle to enterprise AI right now. It's the garbage in, garbage out problem.
Oh, right, the data quality.
Exactly. The inconsistency in ERP data usually comes from humans using free text fields creatively or different regional offices using the same field for entirely different purposes.
Like one region uses a field for shipping notes and another uses it for internal routing.
Right, and if you feed that chaotic data into an AI model, it hallucinates wildly.
And continuous transaction controls strip away that flexibility.
Precisely. So for concrete examples, the author should explicitly link these AI requirements back to the CTC requirements discussed in the very first point of their guide.
Okay.
They can explain that because government platforms require mandatory, perfectly populated fields like business partner, VAT numbers, and line item tax classifications. Enforcing these strict data entry controls naturally eliminates the inconsistent use of fields across company codes.
So you can't just put whatever you want in those fields anymore.
You can't. The author can demonstrate that the canonical data structure built to satisfy Saudi Arabia's ZATCA e-invoicing framework, or Italy's authorities, is exactly the semantically coherent data foundation that AI systems require to function.
What you are essentially saying is that AI readiness is a free rider on the compliance mandate. You are building the data lake that AI needs just to keep the government from shutting down your supply chain.
That is the crucial insight the author needs to highlight. If you go to a CFO and say, hey, we need $10 million to clean up our master data so we can eventually use predictive AI,
they will defer that project for years.
Exactly. It's viewed as a luxury. But if you say, we have to strictly lock down our master data and field usages immediately because otherwise the government of Poland will reject our invoices and halt our revenue stream.
That project gets funded tomorrow morning.
Tomorrow morning. It maintains the narrative through line perfectly. The consultant isn't just dropping tech buzzwords. They are showing how deep compliance architecture unlocks massive downstream business value.
By solving the immediate compliance crisis, you accidentally solve the long-term AI data crisis.
Exactly. The decoupling forces data standardization, and that standardization enables future technologies.
Okay, so establishing that decoupled technical architecture and ensuring the data payload is pristine only solves the digital half of the equation.
Right, the machines are good, but...
But who is maintaining the engine?
Exactly.
The success of the system ultimately relies on the human operating model running it. which brings us to the final section of the Go Live document on architecture governance.
Right, the post-go-live environment.
So I'm synthesizing the proposed operating model here, and the text puts a massive emphasis on continuous regulatory monitoring and collaboration between the indirect tax team and the technology team.
It does, yes.
I want to push back on the practical application of this advice. Telling the indirect tax team and the technology team they must collaborate is like telling a chef and a mechanic to build a kitchen together.
That is a perfect way to describe it.
They possess entirely different vocabularies and priorities. How do we prevent this from becoming just an empty corporate mandate?
The proposed operating model for post-go-live architecture governance lacks the specific operational mechanics necessary to overcome traditional departmental silos.
So it's just lip service?
Pretty much. The weakness is that the material correctly identifies that neither the indirect tax team nor the technology team can perform regulatory monitoring and impact assessment alone.
Which is true, they do need each other.
They do, but it only states the collaboration must be designed explicitly without providing the reader with a tangible framework for how that handoff actually functions in a real corporate environment.
And designed explicitly is just corporate shorthand for we hope you figure it out.
It really is. Like earlier you mentioned the chef and the mechanic. The kitchen is currently on fire while the government is impatiently waiting for their meal. The tax team speaks in legal liability jurisdictional updates and effective dates.
Right, and the tech team speaks in APIs, payload structures, and release cycles.
Exactly. So my suggestion here is to detail a precise step-by-step governance workflow that defines exactly how these two distinct teams translate a regulatory announcement into an architectural reality.
But wait, isn't a service level agreement or a regular sync meeting enough? I mean, I've seen companies attempt to bridge this gap by just throwing both teams into a weekly status call, assuming proximity will breed understanding.
Proximity breeds resentment if there isn't a structured translation mechanism. It needs to be a blueprint, not a suggestion.
Okay, so walk me through what that blueprint actually looks like. What is the operational mechanism that forces these two distinct mentalities to function as a single unit?
For concrete examples, the author should outline a specific formal handoff mechanism. For instance, describe a scenario where the indirect tax team tracks a new mandate announcement using authority websites.
Okay, so tax spots the new law.
Right. Crucially, they don't just send an email or set up a meeting with IT. They create a formal impact assessment document outlining the required business document standards.
Meaning the exact data fields the government is demanding.
Yes, exactly.
So, returning to the earlier analogy, they write down the recipe and the ingredients needed, and they slide that ticket across the pass to the mechanic.
Precisely. And this formal document triggers a specific service level agreement, or SLA, for the technology team.
Oh, so it starts a clock.
It starts a clock. The tech team then has a defined window to assess whether SAP Integration Suite or standard EDI frameworks can extract that specific data, or if the compliance orchestration layer needs reconfiguration.
And then they just build it?
Well, the author should then detail how the two teams jointly verify the canonical SAP integration layer before any new authority connectivity is established.
The insight here isn't just about forcing collaboration. It's about structured translation. The workflow acts as an API between human departments.
That's a great way to put it, an API between departments.
Because the tax person shouldn't have to sit in IT sprint planning meetings to understand how standard APIs work.
No, definitely not.
And the SAP architect shouldn't have to read through the nuances of European VAT law.
Right. The structured handoff translates the legal requirement into a technical payload requirement. It removes the necessity for either side to become experts in the other's domain. And importantly, it creates rigorous accountability.
Because if a mandate goes live and the company's invoices are being rejected, you don't just have two departments pointing fingers at each other in a panic.
No, you look at the translation engine. Did tax fail to trigger the formal assessment document?
Or did IT fail to meet the SLA for the extraction analysis?
Exactly. It completely operationalizes compliance and removes the siloed defensiveness from the equation. By detailing the exact SLA workflow, the author turns a theoretical best practice into a functional operational manual.
It's the difference between telling someone to build a car and handing them the blueprints for the assembly line.
Yeah, and you know the underlying material here is already incredibly strong. They've laid out a vision for the future of SAP implementation that is highly accurate and deeply necessary.
It just needs that extra layer of operational reality.
Right.
By making these strategic adjustments, grounding the economics properly, framing the AI data narrative, and detailing the governance mechanics, they ensure their insights are immediately actionable for the practitioners reading them.
Excellent. So let's briefly recap the three main actionable takeaways from today's critique. First, substantiate the economic argument against embedding tax logic in the SAP core by using concrete side-by-side comparative examples.
Right. Contrast the painful, developer-heavy, ERP-centric changes against the agile, decoupled approach.
Second, seamlessly integrate the AI data readiness point. Frame it not as an isolated distraction, but as an inevitable, highly valuable byproduct of enforcing strict data entry controls.
Clean data for the government means clean data for your AI models.
Exactly.
And finally, define the exact step-by-step governance workflow between the indirect tax and technology teams.
Frame it as an asynchronous translation engine with formal handoffs.
Perfect.
We highly encourage the listener to apply these structural and narrative enhancements, and we submit their revised guides to us for another critique. We would love to see how this material evolves. Keep up the great work.